thinking about that in the age of the climate crisis, I think gives us a tremendous opportunity to explore and to embody possibility.
We want to awaken in order to be of service to everyone.
Creative cultural allegiance, and how do we use that to, in a purposeful way, is a critical question now for us all.
Comment faire en sorte de nourrir une nouvelle réalité? Comment avoir créé de l'art qui soit régénératif, qui nourrisse quelque chose?
One of the things I look for is for artists and the cultural sector to help us envisage a future that's positive.
Some of the things that were really resonant for me were the idea that self-care is community care, that solutions scale up more effectively than they trickle down, and
there are no limits. And the arts helps us to push against that limited set of beliefs and helps us to remember that the way that we know things to be right now is not fixed.
C'est dans n'importe quel milieu, quand on veut faire des grands changements systémiques, il faut changer la culture. Et les arts et la culture sont des bons outils pour changer la culture.
I think the art that I'm excited about has unifying potential, but is kind of slow acting as opposed to activism.
And the arts can help us do that by giving us a shared sense of this moment and its gravity, but also of what's possible and how quickly that tipping point could be reached.
Je pense qu'il faut laisser l'énergie créatrice libre, pas inconsciente. Et c'est là où l'éducation, les mouvements sociaux, l'éducation peut-être par l'action, tu vois, je vais me contredire, je dirais, et par l'art, mais pas par l'art qui est servile, mais un art qui est libre.
So that we can together, as a human species, work toward what I call the ultimate act of reconciliation, to help heal the earth.
I think the arts and culture more widely has a huge role to play in shaping our belief systems and values that determine the way that we relate to the environment.
Talk about how the world will be different when we enact these changes, and how do you tell a story that gets to that, because that gets people engaged and excited, because you're then telling the story about what we're fighting for, not what we're fighting against. And that is where the energy is in a story.
C'est pas nécessaire de réunir des grandes foules, tu sais, puis de faire des actions d'éclat pour qu'il y arrive quelque chose. Juste un petit peu, juste une petite chose, ça a toujours de l'impact.
The shift is that faculty are really no longer just experts. They are knowledge brokers or knowledge intermediaries.
Hear a bird as a musician, right? A creek as a musician. And then that puts us into that intimate relationship with the environment again.
I think capitalism's over. But the problem is we have nothing to replace it with. And here is when we need our artists and others to tell us what kind of vision they have for a future that is different than that.
Pour moi, le défi de l'enjeu écologique ou de la crise écologique dans laquelle on se trouve, c'est de bien comprendre la source du problème.
The recognition and finding ways to assist people in an awareness of all the good and the possible and the beautiful and those things that can lead is one of the roles that artists can specifically play.
To really listen to what the call is in you and follow it. I think there's something that's very generative and supportive about feeling a sense of purpose in a time of collapse.
The role of artists and culture is fundamental and so necessary, and we need so much more of it.
Ça a pris beaucoup d'efforts pour changer les choses, mais au moins on a comme des exemples dans l'histoire où en se mettant ensemble, on a été capable de surmonter les injustices et il faut s'inspirer de ça.
There is a future. It may look very different. And sometimes I think the inability to see exactly what that future is or plan for it can be confused for there not being one.
Are we willing, if we believe in these values, to divest from our arts practice or change radically our performance practice?
If there is any chance to survive, I think that kind of slowing down through listening and meditation and through not doing so much, I think there's some hope in that.
il faut que l'art vienne insuffler, du désir puis de la puissance vers un avenir meilleur. Mais c'est pas l'artiste qui va décider. Puis ça me dérange. Ça me dérange d'avoir un poids sur les épaules, de changer le monde, tout en n'ayant pas le pouvoir de le faire, réel.
Creating anything, art, sofas, whatever it is, allows us to give of ourselves to something that may not be lasting, but in the moment, that act of creation can engender hope, can engender a sense of autonomy, a sense of possibility.
Here's what intrigued me about the artist, what artists were producing in the war, is that in the main it was not dystopian, even though the war was horrific. It was rallying us. The tone was rallying us.
It's not enough to do carbon neutral work. We want to do carbon positive work. We want our artwork to be involved with ecological restoration. What does that mean?
Si on veut avancer, il faut, si on veut apprendre et apprendre à désapprendre, il va falloir être vulnérable. Et donc de voir la résilience comme étant la capacité d'être vulnérable.
And so it feels to me increasingly like there's not a lack of awareness or a lack of concern or even a lack of willingness, but actually a lack of agency.
The thing about a preparedness mindset is that you are thinking into the future. And so if one of those scenarios happens, you've already mentally prepared in some sort of way for it. So you're not dealing with the shock.
And the idea that constraints can actually be of benefit to the creative process is one that I think you can apply to things that on the surface appear to be barriers instead of constraints. And capitalism, arguably, is one of those.
Comment on peut se raconter la Terre? Comment on peut se raconter l'expérience terrestre quand on partage un lieu entre branches, glaises, pansements de réparation, entre traces de la terre sur une toile ou soi-même couché sur la terre, peu importe, tous les éléments qu'on pourrait apporter comme traces possibles d'une expérience partageable. Et de là, tout d'un coup, naît des images de notre partage de l'écologie.
Going back to reality, one of the issues that we are not tackling is that we're taking a dystopian view upon our individual activities that creates guilt syndromes and neuroses, which of course means that the systems of power are working.
The arts are not about pushing any one particular solution or telling people this is what you need to do. It's about saying, here's a problem. Let's think about it together. Let's explore avenues we could take. Let's think about what it means, and what it means not just, should I drive a car or not, but what it means as in, who are we on this earth? What is our role? How do we fit in the bigger ecosystem of the entire planet?
In terms of why people are so often unable to accept the reality of climate change, I will say I think it's very understandable because the scale and the violence of it is just so vast. It's difficult to comprehend, and it's also so depressing and enraging if one knows the politics behind it. And overwhelming. So, I don't think we as a species deal with things that have those qualities very well, and we tend to look away.
Puis je trouve que l'art, c'est pas un bon véhicule pour l'activisme. Je suis vraiment désolée pour tous ceux qui s'intéressent à ça. Moi, je pense que je ne vais pas choquer personne, mais parfois ça peut risquer de tomber dans la propagande ou de tomber un peu dans l'idéologie ou dans une sorte de facilité qui me désole au sens où je pense que l'art peut faire tellement plus que ça.
If you task the arts sector with how to make messages not about the crisis, but on the shifts in behavior that are necessary on a more meaningful basis.
I do also at the same time see that there are a lot of ways in which people in my community use the landscape in a disrespectful way, not considering that that's someone's home, that a wild place is not just a recreational playground for humans. It's not necessarily a source of wealth generation. It's actually a living, breathing entity and a home to other things.
What motivates me is talking to students in a way that they're not going to come back to me in 10 years with this look on their face. Dr. Hiser, why didn't you tell me this? Why didn't you tell me?
Ce sont des médiums qui peuvent être utilisés facilement pour pouvoir faire la sensibilisation. Et aussi pour pouvoir comprendre quelles sont les motivations qui poussent les populations humaines à certains comportements.
And small steps like that, even if it's only a couple of people at a time, that could spread. And I think that, no one person is going to be able to change the world, but that doesn't mean we should give up.
Normal life in North America does not leave us room for grief. We do not know how to handle grief. We don't know what to do with it. We push it away. We channel it. We contain it. We compartmentalize it. We ignore it. We believe that it's something that has an end, that it's linear or there are stages. We believe it's something we can get through.
I think the transformation of knowledge is really important. That's what we can do is from our generation to the next generation is try and help prepare them for the impacts of climate change. But it doesn't have to be all doom and gloom.
Si c'est jouer si c'est interprété, tout d'un coup, ça nous emmène ailleurs. Et quand je parle de ces travaux-là, parfois à des gens plus scientifiques ou des directeurs du musée, tout de suite, ils accrochent en disant, c'est extraordinaire, avec la musique, on peut faire passer tellement de choses.
I'm very, very curious to see what the arts can do to convene us together as a society around particular areas of challenges and interests that we're all feeling and needing to face.
Philosophically, art is one of the only places that we can still ask these questions, play out politics, and negotiate ideas.
Climate change is actually a cultural issue, not a scientific issue.
Moi, je pense qu'on n'a pas besoin de rien réécrire du tout. Je pense qu'on a juste besoin de porter attention. Je pense qu'on a juste besoin d'écouter. En fait, je pense qu'on a juste besoin de se la fermer un peu.
Art is the medicine that actually allows us to metabolize charge. It allows us to metabolize trauma. It takes that intensity that's left in the system, and and this goes all the way back to ritual. I mean, art for me is sort of a tributary coming off from ritual that is still sort of consensually allowed in this reality when the direct communication with nature through ritual was silenced.
And so what I've been trying to do with this report is really articulate the way in which these different disruptions are putting us in a very different reality. And it's a reality in which we go from being a kind of secondary, entertaining class to maybe having a capacity to sit at the heart of a lot of really critical problem-solving challenges.
For me, it's all happening on a spectrum, like where there is no drop-off point at which our species goes extinct, but rather that extinction started a long time ago. And it started with the suppression of indigenous ways of knowing. It started with colonization and the selective exploitation of certain parts of the world and the disappearance of different ways of understanding the cosmos and the balance of man and nature and how society can live within nature. And what I'm really getting to is that the climate crisis to me isn't something that, it's not a tragedy of the commons. And I think that's often framed as if it is. Like, we're all too greedy and self-involved to take care of our common planet and therefore we'll all suffer for it. It's actually, to me, a very directed, intentional thing, and I don't think humanity can be placed on one plane when it comes to climate change.
Pour moi, une manifestation de l'art doit émettre des ondes. Et ça se voit pas, ça se ressent. Et donc, ça demande à l'être, ceux qui participent avec moi dans mes projets, ou moi-même dans l'espace que je vais manifester ces objets-là, c'est d'être dans une porosité de mon corps qui permette qu'il y a des ondes qui se produisent. Et forcément, ces ondes-là, mélangées à la Terre, mélangées, et que tout ensemble, on est en coopération, c'est sûr que ça a un effet invisible qui est l'onde, et qui est l'onde du partage.
once you have these impacts, it will change the economic and social fabric of our reality such that whether we like it or not, we're facing climate change. And if we face it, the hope is maybe we can come up with some kind of partial solutions to save some parts, let some parts go, to preserve what it means to be civilized and to have a civilization, to transform our civilization into something different than what it is, obviously, because this one based almost entirely on industrialization and the logic of financial capitalism and perpetual growth. This is unsustainable, radically so, and it's all, it seems to me, coming to an end.
And I think we need a conversation between curators like myself or producers, and also people like you and thinkers and funders to come together and to understand the current situation, accept reality, and then strategize, find a strategy of how we can put things into place, how we can provide more funding for different types of projects.
Well, I think that artists are, for the most part, in tune with what's going on in the world. We're all reporters, somehow journalists who translate our message into our art.
L'artiste est un être qui vit dans sa contemporanité, qui absorbe le caca, tout ce qui se passe, puis qui essaie de le transformer en quelque chose de beau puis de puissant pour un tremplin pour aller vers mieux. Mais on pourrait en rester là, dans le sens que les gens, comment ils utilisent l'art dans leur vie? L'artiste a peut-être toutes ces volontés-là, mais c'est quoi la place de l'art qu'on fait dans nos vies?
Scale is really trying to become that gathering place that will engender that high-level collaboration, which hopefully will create those positive tipping points.
The Green Sessions was invented because this small group of people got together and decided we wanted to do something that created impact. And we put really a fairly modest amount of money behind it and a huge amount of hours of time and passion. And I think I'm so proud of the impact. So I think for me, there's a big lesson, which is, you know, a small group of committed people can really make a difference. And I think on this agenda, that is really, really encouraging for all of us. And that has been very, very inspiring for me. And on the flip side, I think what I sense at the Green Sessions is actually the power that we hold as a community, and actually the feeling that our sector is in dialogue about this most urgent issue is very, very uplifting and very powerful. So I'm just really interested in new and more opportunities for us to collaborate as a sector and pulling people into focus and a place of knowledge on this agenda, because that really was our starting hypothesis, which is that our sector needs literacy and confidence in order to step forward with impact. And that was our mission. And we have scratched the surface of that, I think, but I'm very proud of the contribution that we've made, and I'm very encouraged to do more.
Is I think art needs to get on the street, because raising awareness in a gallery is really speaking to the choir. So I mean, I'll leave raising awareness because we both agree that, you know, the time for that is past, but I think art needs to revert back to artisan and crafts, and in the sense that imagination can lead to crafting things that we will actually need for survival.
Là, pour l'écologie, on a le même besoin, c'est-à-dire que les artistes se mobilisent pour créer un imaginaire d'un futur où ça se passe bien. Alors que pour l'instant, l'imaginaire qui est véhiculé par les fictions, c'est surtout celle de l'effondrement, la collapsologie, un avenir où ça se passe mal.
I really believe that what we call arts in this culture now, its role is to sort of inform, form, and transform the nature of cultures in relation with the world. You know, and I think that's what we're talking about when we're talking about work that addresses the climate crisis.
Be governed. I think the same model could and should be used by scale. To have these arts and culture groups come together, identify a shared vision, a shared set of actions that together constitute a true climate emergency agenda for the arts and culture sector.
The way to think about this is that the way to make artists and arts organizations thrive is to make sure that climate change is a part of their thoughts and their business plan and their strategic plan, right? We know now that the timeline is short and severe climate change effects are within a time horizon that is in a strategic planning time horizon.
That's right.
Yeah.
10 years, yeah.
If we hope for them to thrive, we need to help them move that forward. And so hopefully through our grants and policies, that's going to happen.
La vraie tragédie du Canada, c'est pas qu'on a empêché les gens de parler leur langue. La vraie tragédie, c'est que les nouveaux venus n'ont pas adopté la culture d'ici, les cultures d'ici.
That embracing Indigenous values vis-a-vis nature is a kind of key to Canada to actually engaging fully in climate action. And then it was really the formation of community. I mean, there were so many highlights. I learned so much from so many people, including the people in this room with us now. But it was really the formation of this community and that momentum that Emma alluded to just now. I think it's something very real. And I think that with scale, which I'm sure Claude has told his listeners all about, is the next kind of a level up that we carry on this work.
I would say ask yourself a lot of questions. I'd say ask yourself what do you as an artist want to perpetuate in the world, and ask whether what you're doing is perpetuating that.
It's just so powerful not to be alone, and we forget that. We've been just getting this, a constant stream of communications from our culture about individualism, and even in terms of the environmental movement, what you can do on your own and how you can reduce your carbon footprint. And it's just unbelievable what it means to join a group. Just join a group, join a group, join a group.
OK, mais ce balado a été produit par un homme blanc, avec tous les préjugés de l'époque?
And in the broadest sense, it's like this critter, this virus, this nature has moved in to this realm of culture. And we're watching things drop away that we created.
What's the kind of
theater that has already been, what are the plays that already exist in Canadian theater history? And what are more of the kinds of stories that we need to be telling and sharing, and how to think about the transition that we're facing socially from a justice perspective that really advances and brings forward the impacts.
It's about asking, where do I start? And maybe you don't know exactly where you want to end up yet, but if you start somewhere and you do that in a way that is curious, and you try things and you get feedback and you keep iterating and keep trying things, I think ultimately meaningful things will emerge. If not at the outset, then over time, because we're all in this constant learning process, right?
Pour moi, c'est sûr que ça passe par plus de collaboration. Puis c'est ça qui est intéressant aussi. Vraiment passer du modèle comme take, make, waste à care, dare, share. Puis
a quote that I love so much from the Native American activist Winona LaDuke, and she said one time, it's as if we're on a raft and we all know we're drowning. She said, but if we could, and we don't know how to swim, she said, but if we could see another raft up ahead, even those of us who can't swim would dive into that water and make our way to that raft. Help me build that raft. And I feel like that's one of the things that artists can be so incredibly involved and helpful at this moment, along with scientists and sustainabilists and all kinds of people, to really come together and say, we have to shift. It could be really hard. It could be really fun. We just have to try and go for it.
Yeah, but we have a popular soundtrack now for the climate emergency. I sometimes listen to them on my oldies playlist on Spotify. Do you know that tune from 2025? How did it go? It's the climate emergency.
Okay, but okay, something I'm having trouble understanding here. So they had the scientific data, they had the reports. What exactly was it that they were missing? What didn't they have? Why didn't they act? Why were they why were they so stagnant in their attempts to fight this problem?
And what I have so much gratitude for this group for is this commitment to Indigenous artists and activists, and from the beginning of making sure that they're to try to reach out to those who have been on the front lines for far longer than I have, and who've been doing this work, and that I feel so grateful.
We may not relight the fires that used to burn in our villages, but we carry the embers from those fires in our hearts and learn to light new fires in a new world.
We can recreate the spirit of community we had, of kinship, of relationship to all things, of union with the land, harmony with the universe, balance in living, humility, honesty, truth, and wisdom in all of our dealings with each other.